Hi, I'm Krista Gregg, your host for She Diaries, a podcast sharing the real, unfiltered stories of women who've lost their husbands to suicide. It's raw, it's honest, and it's about finding your way through the unthinkable. Before we get to the show, please know this podcast includes real stories of suicide loss and is not for little ears. Some episodes may reference the method of suicide and include emotionally intense or uncomfortable descriptions. We understand how sensitive this content is and carefully edit each episode to honor and respect both our guests and listeners. If you or someone you love is struggling, call or text 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone. Please take care while listening, pause if you need to, and you can find links to additional mental health resources in our show notes. Thank you for listening. Today's guest is Alexandra Wyman, a mother, widow, author, pediatric occupational therapist, and host of the Forward to Joy podcast. After losing her husband to suicide in 2020, Alexandra found herself searching for guidance through the fog of grief, and the grief was huge, you guys, just like anyone would anticipate. So she wrote The Suicide Club, a book she wishes had existed during her own healing journey. In our conversation, Alexandra opens up about the early days of loss, the pressure to grieve the right way, and how she is rebuilding her life. Her story encourages others to take small, steady steps towards joy, even in the midst of immense sorrow. This is Alexandra Wyman's story.
These are feelings drag me away. Fingers crossing out on my way.
Hi, Alexandra. It's so good to see you and have you here on She Diaries. How are you doing today?
I am doing so well, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
That's awesome. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, my day job is as a pediatric occupational therapist, and I'm also a mom to a 5.5-year-old. And then I also have this opportunity, like today, to be able to chat about the loss of my husband by suicide. And so after he passed, I decided that I wanted to spend more time finding meaning and purpose where I could help others navigate grief.
Let's dive in. Tell me a little bit about Sean and how you guys met and your relationship.
Yeah, we had a very whirlwind romance. At the time that we met, I was over dating. I had this checklist that I thought, okay, this is what a successful life looks like. You go to college, you meet a partner, you get married, you buy a house, you have your kids, your 4.2 dogs, and your white picket fence. And so that was kind of what I had attached to. And I that did not happen to me in the timeline that I was told it needed to. So when I met Sean, I was kind of just over dating. And I actually, just before, I would think about 2 months before I met him, I got this little ping that said, try this online dating site. And I was like, oh, I'm so tired of dating. And but I did it. And so he was the second date I went on, and I was the last one for him because he was like, I'm done trying this dating thing too. And we just hit it off. We felt like we had a very, very deep soul connection. We just understood each other. We really just we used to joke that we were the male female version of each other, and it just fit. We fit together really well. And so we were engaged very quickly. And 8 months after we met, we were married, and we had just purchased a house together. And then about 10 months after, we met is when I found out I was pregnant. So, I mean, all of those things, check, check, check. It's like, yes, we got this. We got our house. We've got our family growing. And there wasn't anything really hidden about him. I knew that he had a tough childhood. He did have quite a bit of some traumatic experiences in his childhood. And these were things that he just couldn't outrun. And we tried so many different things to try and help him manage his stress. And that was a big part of our marriage is figuring out how do you handle having a child. We both had careers and we've got this house and all these social stressors, I guess, just in regards to who has what role in the family. And it was a lot. It was a lot to manage. And I don't think there's any preparation for that until you're in it. And so yeah, we were trying all sorts of things. And then of course COVID hit and that added even more stress to things. And so while I knew of some of the struggles he was having, I didn't know to what extent those struggles were. I will say there weren't any signs. There was nothing that I could go back to and be like, oh, I should have done this or that. I mean, of course, there always shoulds and things we want to change. But there was nothing directly related to him dying by suicide. And so, yeah, he one Saturday morning, the night before, he had been hanging out with his friends at a birthday party. I stayed home with our son because he, even to this day, has never been the greatest with bedtime. He's a really good sleeper once he falls asleep, but boy, he likes to stay up a little later. So, Sean went and hung out with his friends, and the next day, we kind of had an argument over it because he stayed out all night, and I was just like, "What are you like? What is happening? What is happening?" And then he went missing for about 6 hours, and the end of finding him was that he had died by suicide.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing the story and sharing this with everybody. I wanted to ask really quick when you talked about, because I feel like all of us, I had the same experience growing up where it's like, okay, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get married. Like I had the same checklist. I feel like our society says, okay, once you check these boxes, you're going to be happy and you're living that fulfilled life that everyone says is the goal to have. But once you have a kid and once you are in the thick of it with full-time work and trying to figure out communication strategies and managing stress as a couple, it's a whole nother world. What types of things were you guys trying to manage that and to get to continue improving, I suppose?
Yeah, so we were I was trying to find time for Sean to go exercise and run. He liked running, sometimes liked running, but he always felt better after he ran. He was a drummer, so I got him a session here locally in Denver where he could just go jam and I was like, "You could do that after work." It was so close to his work. Because it was during COVID, the social piece really impacted him. So we did an online trivia with some friends and we'd all take turns coming up with questions and then would jump online and do that. He really struggled with the idea of therapy. Something I really understood more after his death was just that people can understand or know that there are resources. They can know that there are books, podcasts, therapy. There's all sorts of these things. But if you don't believe those things will work for you, then it's harder to engage in them. And that was Sean's experience. He felt broken to an extent that he didn't believe that any sort of therapy could ever fix him. No amount of talking to someone. And he also grew up in a situation and also very familiar with my own childhood of you don't necessarily talk about it with other people. And sometimes we just sweep things under the rug and somehow we think that they'll go away or you just pick yourself up by the bootstraps. So there was a lot of this conflict for him where I think he knew somewhere that he needed help, but didn't know how to access help because he didn't believe any of it would help or actually work. So we tried to figure out ways to give him that social outlet that he needed. But there was stress. He was a mechanic. He worked on high end European cars, and so he was considered an essential employee. So while everyone else is at home, he was still having to go into work, and I think that also added some additional stress. Luckily, we did pot up with family, but that was hard because it was mostly my family, and so I was used to their antics, and sometimes even that was even more stressful for him. So, really, I think when it comes to reviewing or reflecting on what was going on for Sean or my understanding is I think it was a combination of just stress that continued to compound without really having healthy coping skills to really work through and manage that stress.
No, that makes complete sense. When he passed away, and tell me what it was like when you got the news and when you heard what happened.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, he went missing for about 6 hours, and then it was just me trying to get in touch with him, trying to get in touch with the friends he was with before. I was working with 2 different sheriff's departments because I had some information that he had gone into a different county, and essentially what ended up happening is, he sent some goodbye texts, which we didn't really fully recognize. I mean, I got a text pretty early on and knew I was like, "Oh, I think this is what's happening." But he sent some goodbye text. He also put his note on Facebook, so that started a whole thing where people started calling me and showing up at my house like, "Where is he? What are you doing?" And so that that was I was like, "Thanks, of all places."
No. Well, and
Um,
you're in the middle of COVID, so everyone's at home. Like Facebook, social media, that's the place where everyone's at right now to even try to be social.
yes. And, it's interesting because people are like, "Well, are you doing anything?" Well, of course, I've been living it for 6 hours. So, yeah, I am trying to do something. There's only so much you can do, and then about 2:15 is when I just suddenly, I just felt that there was something that had changed in my life, and I collapsed in my kitchen and was just screaming. And my mom and my sister were at my house at that time. My son was at my parents' house, so he was being watched there. And I just was screaming and I said, "He's gone. I just know he's gone." But I wasn't officially informed. Like, no one could actually tell me that he was. I just somehow knew. And then at 6:30 that evening is when the sheriff's department actually finally found me and they delivered the news that indeed he had passed.
And when did they find them? Did a neighbor call or did someone alert the police or what
So I was able to work with them. He died in the mountains in Colorado, so I was able to alert him to what his car. Essentially, they found his car. They couldn't locate him. What I suspect, I mean, I don't have the exact details, but my suspicion is that those who were looking for him heard him, and they did attempt life saving measures when they found him. It was just too late.
Yeah.
And so they had to work on the 2 counties had to work on communicating with each other. They had to make sure that they had the right individual, before that they could let me know. And so there was a period of time where I just kept calling and they said they kept looking 'cause they couldn't officially tell me that they had already found him.
So the sheriff comes and knocks on your door. You finally get confirmation that your feelings are valid. This isn't a mistake. This isn't a you are feeling validated, but also I'm sure just this explosion of grief and oh my gosh, what are we going to do next happened. Can you describe some of your emotions kind of the next few days and what life looked like and support and the chaos of it all?
Sure. Chaos is a very good descriptor. Um, I was pretty numb and in shock, and I'll say my shock hung out for about 4 months. So, in the immediacy, it was very much shock. I didn't even know who to call, or how I was supposed to inform people. There were some people who knew what was happening, obviously, because of the note on Facebook. I mean, it's not like he explicitly said, "I'm ending my life," but it was clear what it was. Um and so my situation was a little different in the fact that on the night that he died, some of his friends had come over to my parents' house. That's where I was staying that evening. And they decided to inform me. And it just kind of started. I'm trying to think of exactly how it went. But essentially, they were informing me that they felt that I was at fault. They believed that had he been with his ex-wife, this wouldn't have happened and that I must have done something. And 3 days after Sean passed, I was informed that these friends and part of Sean's family were gonna take legal action against me. It turned out that none of that could transpire because they didn't actually have any evidence of wrongdoing. They didn't have anything to show any negligence on my part. They wanted to take me to court to challenge the legitimacy of our marriage, even though Sean died 4 days before our second wedding anniversary. They also wanted to figure out if there was a way that they could get custody of my son, and they wanted to see if there was a way that they could acquire my home. And so I'm sure if you're listening to this, like, wait a second, how is this possible? They wanted to take the feelings that they had about the loss of Sean, which he was a very charismatic, like life of the party kind of guy, great sense of humor, much more than his death. Like he was an amazing, amazing person. And I now can sort of understand. Although, like the route that they went, I mean, they did try and do a whole social media campaign against me. There were events held without me being present. They essentially blocked me out of his memorial, so I couldn't take part. I mean, I attended his memorial, but I wasn't allowed to take part in any of it. And so with all of this, uh, you know, it was just for about 8 months after Sean died, I wasn't really able to grieve because it was what is coming next. I never knew. I mean, I was in touch with the sheriff's department, had to figure out more security. I worked at a school where one of the friends, their kids went, and I had to move schools, and they had to have extra security. I mean, it was a little intense, so I wasn't really able to start grieving till 8 months later. And to think through of these individuals that they, in my opinion, wanted to take away everything they could of my life without taking away my life because they couldn't get Sean back. I mean, there was a comment made actually to me that it should have been me and not him. Um, and so that was really hard, and I was basically just a shell of a person. I had so many different emotions, and I was just basically just trying to keep my organs working so that I was actually breathing and alive without really having any sense of that there could be quality of life or any joy in the life again. And I had my son was 1. So I had this 1-year-old that I was trying to at that point, it was everything was about him. How do I help him get him to where he needed to go and be? And then eventually, when I could set really good boundaries with these individuals and find a good therapist, I was able to start working through my own grief.
When you talked about how he left a note on Facebook and he sent text, can you describe some of the messages that he sent? Did he even give a clear answer as to what was going through his mind, his emotions at the time? Often it's not always a clear understanding to the answer of why, but what was his main, I guess, message to everybody?
Um, there I don't know that we're ever gonna get the why. Yeah. I think that's something,
Absolutely.
that is there other than, again, the speculation of what someone was going through and whatever emotional pain that they were experiencing, and that's truly what I believe for Sean is that his emotional pain, it you couldn't see it, and I think that's why suicide is so shocking for so many because you can't see the pain. It's not like someone with a physical disability or a disease that is physically being apparent. And so with his note, essentially he just said that there were things in his life he couldn't overcome and he wasn't able to work through some things. And yeah, I mean, again, there was no inkling prior.
Of course.
Yes, like there were stressors, but for me, where I was in my like being his wife and just where I was, I didn't think there was anything that we couldn't figure out a way to work through. And so, and I don't think that he planned it. I don't think that he was like on this day. I think it was just a culmination of factors for that particular morning, and that's what he decided would help him end his pain.
Knowing what you know about your unique experience, a lot of times the advice through national suicide prevention organizations is asking people, "Do you have a plan? How would you do it?" What is your thoughts on that approach if you think someone is going through a lot of mental health struggles?
I definitely agree that you need to ask the question point blank. You're not going to be putting the information or the idea into someone's head by asking them, because most likely they've already had those thoughts. So I do think if someone is at that late of a point where it's clear that they're having difficulties, then yes, ask the question and see if there can be that immediate support. I personally, and just in my own process in my own journey, think that prevention starts earlier. I think prevention is something that we can do without having I guess, before ever getting to a point of needing additional mental health support. We all have things that happen to us. Like we all have mental health needs. It's just, there's no one whose brain works great and perfectly. Everybody, yeah, yes, we have great brain health, but there's no one that can go through life without struggling. And I'm a believer in connection and healthy coping skills. And when we can create that and work through our own stuff and whatever our own experiences have been, have contributed to how we function as adults and heal from past experiences that had hurt us, then we can teach others and kids how to do it. So that's kind of where I agree with that prevention side. I think current prevention ideas are just really late. They're more reactionary versus how can we respond? And in my opinion, to respond is to let's help kids. Let's beef up those social emotional supports for kids in elementary school. How can we as adults work through our stuff in order to be able to guide our kids and let them know that whatever they're feeling or going through, we can get through.
I love that so much because it's very much proactive. It's before the problem exists. It's teaching those emotional skills and communication skills and those behavioral skills to recognize, hey, I have a problem and it's okay to raise my hand and ask for help. And there is help out there that will work. One thing you said earlier was Sean knew there was help, but his belief in that system and if it would help him, it sounds like it was on shaky ground. But if he knew that earlier, perhaps we can never know, of course. But if anyone else is feeling like there isn't a place for them in the mental health discussion or someone to talk to, there always is space. There is always someone that can listen and can truly help. With the mental health side in mind, you're going through extreme grief. Half of the family, his side of the family, is isolating you. How are you finding the strength to continue to move forward, and what did you do for yourself, and what was your grief process like?
Yeah. So I knew that I had to do something to get through this whole process because of my son. I'll also say that I'm an Aries. So I'm a let's take on a project and let's get through it. And so I was like, oh, all right, you're going to hand me this grief thing. Cool. I'm going to work through it. Let me blow through it and get on with life because I've got this kid I have to raise. Uh, so I very quickly learned that that is not how life, time, or grief really works. And I had to slow down quite a bit. And essentially, when I first was able to really set boundaries, and these boundaries ended up having to be physical. I basically had to tell these individuals that they could not have a relationship with me, they couldn't have a relationship with my son, and I have not since then. But with my grief, really, it's just I ended up meeting a fantastic grief therapist, and he just helped me walk through the process. And at first, I didn't really understand how grief can compile or how if you don't really work through past grief, it's going to come up again. I didn't understand any of that. So he just really helped guide me while letting me have my own process. And I'm still learning to let go of some of the feelings where I wasn't always willing to let myself feel what was going on. So if I was in a meeting and I would just have this grief burst overwhelm me, I would take myself out of that meeting or be like, I can't do this right now, and then try and find time later. And that was a big thing for me was ensuring that I always found a time to release whatever grief that I was feeling. I'm also a private griever. I figured that out through this process, and that was something that didn't go over very well. And I was criticized for because I wasn't crying enough around people. I didn't want to hug people. I mean, I used to be a very huggy person, and even we're at 4.5 years, and I'm still like, sometimes I'll hug, you know. Um, so that was a big thing too, is to discover that I prefer to grieve in private. And so I would set aside time to be able to do that. But the emotions are all over the place. I mean, I literally in 10 seconds could go from anger to sadness to I'm laughing to I'm crying back to anger. I mean, it's unpredictable. And there's no way of telling what feelings are going to come up or how. And one strategy one day isn't going to work the next day. So I definitely feel that it's important to have kind of a toolbox with how many different strategies so that on a particular day you can just be like, okay, this worked once, maybe it'll work again. Because it's just you just never know.
How how long did it take for you to feel okay with the up and down roller coaster cycle? And
Oh,
know that this is okay. This was and was that with the help of the grief counselor? Was that through friends or someone in the in a support group that finally you were just around the right group where it's just, wow, I'm not alone. This is okay.
So there's kind of two answers to that. First, it was really helpful that I found a local well, first it was virtual, but an in-person local suicide support group, suicide survivor support group. And so um th- being around individuals who just understood was very helpful. And I think you're speaking with them. I did start to understand a little bit more that it's up and down. It's going to be like that. I I will say I don't know that I've ever fully embraced that it's okay, only because it still hits sometimes, and I'm like, "Oh, darn it. Okay. I guess I need to sink into this and feel it." Um, I think also, though, what was helpful was when I got to a point where the hard days were getting fewer and fewer, and I was having more good days. And so it still goes back and forth, but I was finding that when I could recognize, "Oh, I just had 2 good days in a row," and then work through the guilt and shame around that because I must be sad for the rest of my life. I can't find any joy. And so that kind of helped when I because understanding that I could start to have more good days helped me realize that the feelings do go up and down, but that at the end of the day, the light at the end of the tunnel for me was, "Oh, I know I'll have another good day." And so knowing that initially it just feels insurmountable. There's no there's just no light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I had someone once and she could read auras and she was like, "Your light is so dim, it looks like it's going to go out." And I was like, "I'm not surprised." And I saw the same person a few months later and she was like, "Oh, there you are." And so understanding and knowing that, oh, I still have an opportunity to get to a good day helps me weather the up and down because I knew that it would assuage at some point.
Wow. And I want to, you said something that I think is actually really powerful, where you said, oh man, I'm having a bad day. I think I unfortunately, or however you said it, you said I have to just sit and sit with those feelings, and
Mm.
I think that is something not to be missed because oftentimes we want to run away from the fear, the anger, the grief, all of the negative feelings that make us feel uncomfortable. But I love that you just said you have to sit and you have to feel them. You have to understand them and feel them. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that process?
Oh, yeah, it's awful. It's horrible,
Yeah.
but it's necessary.
Right.
Because so grief doesn't, it's not just the emotional impact. It can impact your physical being, it can impact relationships. And if we don't move through it, and I've seen this happen to people, I've seen people who get stuck in their grief and it literally eats away at their body. They start to have physical ailments, more things come up. They lose relationships because it's hard for them to connect with people anymore. And I'll be honest, I don't remember when I first saw the glimpse of light through working through these feelings. But I do remember, and of course, through the encouragement of my therapist, who was like, "I'm going to help you work through this. You have to work through it." And I was like, "No, why? This is awful." But being able to just get those glimpses of light or joy really helped encourage me of, okay, I can keep doing this. And also, I call it having an anchor. So as I mentioned, like my son was my anchor. I knew that I did not want this situation to dictate our lives. It would impact our lives, and it still does, and it will. But I didn't want it to dictate. I didn't want everything to be, oh, your dad died. Oh, your husband died. So that was my way of saying I have to do better so that I can do better by my son. But you have to be able to sink into those. I mean, I journaled a lot to try and get out those feelings because if we hold on to things, it just builds up in our bodies and it really does start to make our bodies fall apart. And I just knew somehow that I had to really deal with the anger. And my anger wasn't towards Sean, it was more towards other people. And it was towards the situation I was left in. And somehow, like, I know for me, working through and understanding that this was his choice and that the amount of pain that he was in was more than something I could ever understand. And by separating myself from him and his decision, I was able to accept it a little bit more on that particular day, I'll say. Because some days I don't accept it, and other days I'm much better about it.
Well, and you have permission to feel however you feel and change your mind about how you feel and change perspectives, especially as you continue to learn and grow, as we all do as we continue on. But dealing with how you feel and absorbing it, understanding it, and then also getting it out through journaling or a healthy activity. I hope everyone who is listening hears that it's okay to sit and be sad. It's okay to sit and feel the way that you feel. Um, and so you created a book, and here is the quote that I found on your website, which is forwardtojoy.com. You said, I decided to write a book I wish existed to help me get through such a tragedy and reach a place of peace and joy. What can anyone who is experiencing devastation, loss, and grief, if they pick up your book, what can they hope to learn from you through your experiences?
Sure. So I found there's all sorts of information out there about the stages of grief. And what I found is that I didn't really have stages. I call it more phases of dealing with the aftermath of a loss. And so essentially I broke up my book into those 3 phases. And the reason why I kind of deviated from stages is cuz I think those are emotions we all feel. Those are all things and they come at any moment. You still have to work through them, but it's not linear. And I know that there are experts right now who don't claim that they're linear. Um, but it essentially, I say there's the shock and awe. So there's the first phase of this is you're in it to win it. Like it's the immediacy of whatever the loss is. You're in shock. You have to just manage life. You have, again, just Maslow's hierarchy. You're just trying to make sure that your body survives whatever is happening. And then I have the now what phase. And that's where you're kind of bridging 2 worlds. So you've got this massive amount of grief that you have to work through and in addition to that, you have, your life that has to keep going. And so unfortunately, work doesn't really stop for us. Life doesn't really stop for us. And so you have to manage. The rest of the world moves on and they're like, everything's good. And you're like, no, everything is not great. I'm still devastated, but then I'm still trying to manage grief. And then the last phase I have is finding the collateral beauty. And that's really how can we start to zoom out and see that there is still joy left for us. There are still possibilities. Our life may be taking a different direction than what we thought it would. As we mentioned, our checklist, where's that? But it creates an opportunity to realize that we can get through whatever feelings we have. It does take work, but it is possible.
I want to ask this because you brought up the checklist. Coming full circle a little bit, how do you now see life versus the checklist we're all taught to believe? What is your philosophy or vision for your life now?
Yeah. So I think a successful life is really about who we are and who we're intended to be. And that's getting to our authentic selves and really getting grounded in what who we were made to be. Um, and part of that is to quiet some of the conditioning and work through some of the conditioning we get in our childhood, what society says, of course, with that checklist. And to say that those are things that you can still work toward, but they're not what create successful, excuse me, let's try that one more time, successful life. And instead, the way I look at it is life, there used to be that this checklist, at least for me, was what was predictable. This is what you went to, and all right, follow it. But what I found in this whole experience is really life is not predictable at all. And you can have all those things on a checklist and still something's going to happen. Clearly, I'm an example of that. I was like, yes, we have this. And then when my life exploded, I was like, wait a second, what happened? Like, this is like, how did I get cheated out of this?
Right.
This is what I was told is what was supposed to happen. And so now I look at it as that we as individuals experiencing like we are what are predictable. Our reactions, I wouldn't say reactions, our responses are what can be predictable. when we're aligned and truly who we're meant to be, then I think we respond to situations. We can work through our hurt. We can work through the experiences that have impacted us. And I usually say negatively impacted us. And we can heal all of that and become truly enlightened people. And to me, that's what the successful life looks like is how do we show up to work? How do we show up in our relationships and our friendships? And how can we take our hurts and not project those onto other people or to continue those in generational patterns?
I think that's a fantastic answer. 100%. No, I love it. I absolutely love it. It's not about getting things done or making, like, specific achievements. It's just showing up every day and being present and trying your best every day. Um,
Exactly.
what
Now your answer was much shorter.
Oh, no, but I you gave me the words to summarize. What does your support system look like now?
Oh, I love this question because one of the things I do like to talk about is what that community looks like. And I am a believer that you can't get through grief without a community. The caveat to that is that the community you might think will have your back may not. And so I've even had to walk through this with my own family members where I'm like, oh, okay, I see the limit to where we can be, where you can support and then look for other people. So, the community I have now consists of people in my support group. I say that I like to collect friends who just get it, people I don't have to necessarily explain what's going on, and they just understand and they love me anyway. My community also includes my handyman. It also includes the person who comes and cleans my house and my neighbors who will let my son come over and hang and play with them. Um, that's where it's different because I think when tragedy hits, we tend to assume that family and friends are going to be there. And that's not always the case. And usually it's just a reflection over that in those individuals in their grief process rather than a personalization of our own.
Right.
So it takes some time. I think that was a big part of my grief was I was just so sad. Like, wait, why can't we just come together and grieve the loss of this amazing person instead of pointing fingers and blaming and trying to go after money and all sorts of things. Grief really does make people do ugly things. So now my community is just the individuals who help me and my son thrive.
That's Well, and you mentioned, people going after money, and I know this was, something that you wanted to also share with, anyone who is listening about the importance of setting up a will and
Mhm.
making sure that at any point in life, any of us could walk across the street. I mean, anything can happen. Tragedy strikes every single day. What can you do to prepare for those that you leave behind?
Yes, please write it down. Nothing else. You don't necessarily have to go through a lawyer. You can have something notarized. Some banks will still do it. Um, just write it down. So many things could have been different if Sean had had a will. And at the time, I didn't even have one. It's just again, people and let me back up. I have known other individuals who have had loss in their life, not by suicide, and similar responses. It's almost like people see it as an opportunistic time to go after things. Oh, you have a house. I'm going to go after the house. I'm going to go after the money, anything. And it just clouds the grief. I also just think it's we in our society try and get to the business way too soon in grief. Like we need more time to really grieve, but business has to be taken care of pretty quickly. But I do recommend just write it down, have your wishes somewhere written down, make it really explicit. So that if someone does challenge it, there at least you have something that can hopefully just stand for your rights because otherwise people are guessing. And I can say in my situation, it just became a battle of who knew Sean the best, who meant more to him, who was more important. And it was so ugly that I just felt like it took away again. It just prolonged being able to grieve because there was all this fighting going on over what was best for him. And in my opinion, just misses the whole point. So I do think it's really important to just have your wishes written down somewhere.
Yeah, it almost puts if it's not written down, then everyone's focused on the stuff, not focused on the person, not focused on remembering who Sean was and the good times and the beauty of his life, whatever needs to happen to do that grief process. You're just focusing on stuff at this point. Um,
Yeah, and something I recognize, and again, not to go in a spiritual direction, but I will say for the people I know who didn't really have much of a spiritual life, they were definitely more about making sure they picked through his things. And I offered an opportunity that was a whole nother story, but you know, it did become about what were those things, and that if they left them with me, that somehow I would throw them out because I mean, that was a whole big thing. I would if I got rid of anything, it meant that I didn't care about him, I didn't love him. There was so much additional the stories that we tell ourselves through this whole process, and so I did see that there were people who were asking for things, or they would say, "I want something," and I'd say, "Awesome. What" he was not materialistic. "What would you like that would be meaningful to you?" And I could tell when people were not really they just wanted something was because they didn't know, and they didn't know him, and they did there were certain things I was like, "These are off limits because those are gonna stay with our family, but here, if you want, here are some other things you could have." And usually people didn't know him well enough to know what to ask for. And so it was just this need to hold on to him because, of course, it's like, what he's not here. And something that I learned in grief therapy is that the relationship changes from one of a physical relationship in that that person is physically present to one of memory. And that one is still hard for me. So I'm like, no, I'm not ready for that. Mm-mm,
what does
no.
that mean?
It means that you have to work through that acceptance that the person's not coming back and being able to hold on to the experiences and the memories that we have. And that's what continues that relationship. And so part of that grief process is there still gets to be a relationship. It's just that the person isn't there to, participate in life events the way that they would have. It's just different.
And it's coming to terms with that new relationship, that new
Yes,
that's hard.
which is annoying. Another annoying thing.
Annoying. One more thing you have to deal with.
Yes, another thing.
Well, what would you say to anyone who has someone close in their lives who is grieving and going through a loss? What is the best way to be present or to find a way to be part of that support system if that's something that they wish to do, but maybe they're afraid of stumbling or tripping or making a situation worse?
Yeah. Well, there is no right thing to say. Like, I don't think that there's anything that's a perfect thing to say. I am a believer of just letting the person know that you're there for them because they might not be able to be available to you or to know how to guide you. I had people who are like, "What can we do for you?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like the thing that I need, no one can give me. I need him back in front of me. I need him sitting here next to me holding my hand. And you can't do that." And so I think I found it really helpful when people were just available. I will say a lot of people brought me food for a year. That tends to be what we know we can control is having food.
The meal trains, like the
Exactly.
casserole every night.
Oh, yes. So much frozen food. And so I think just letting the person know that you're in there for them, you're thinking about them, and do it past like the 2 to 4 weeks after the death, because that tends to be when people go back to their lives and they're like, "Whew, all right, I showed up. I was there for that person." But then when reality sets in, their loved one's not coming through the door. That's when you need to hear it. That's when it can feel isolating, is when everyone else is back to enjoying their lives and your life is in, shambles. So and I think be honest about it. If you're not sure what to say, say that. I have no idea what to say to you. I don't. I'm here for you. I'm shocked. I'm so sad. To me, being more real created more connection for me than people trying to, send me things about well, he's in God's hands now. Well, that's great, and don't get me wrong if any of you have said that. That's not a problem. It's just for me, I was like, that's not helpful.
Right.
'Cause I want him in my hands right now. And so I think just being really honest about the awkwardness, and I myself am still awkward. Like I went through this and I'm still awkward sometimes after people, let me know that they've had a great loss. I'm like, oh, because what I want to say is that's a bummer. That just sucks right now. And I'm sorry that you have to go through this. But that, you have to be in the right place at the right time for that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's I feel the awkwardness sometimes as I'm creating the She Diaries podcast where I it's like, "I'm so sorry something so tragic has brought us together, but I would love to learn more." It's and it's like, "Tell me everything," can be tricky, but I do like your response, and I think it's so valid. We're all human. If we just come to it with an honest feeling, emotion, words, it level sets the playing field. Like, just don't pretend to be overly confident if you're not confident, and that's okay. I
Yeah.
actually probably is better.
Well, and what's great about what you're doing, so many people I know get to a point where they want to share their story. Like your purpose and your meaning in your life shifts drastically. And then it's like, well, what do I do? And at some point, I think at least a lot of the survivors I've talked to, they want to find a way to help others. And you're giving a platform to do that, which is amazing, and giving people the opportunity to share their story. And I think that is something that we need, is because the more that we can share, hopefully, it'll encourage other people to start sharing their stories.
Yes. And you're doing a lot of advocacy work as well. What more would you like to see done in the mental health space and recognizing and understanding suicide in the grieving process?
I feel it. I'm like, I'm not sure we have a whole lot of time for that. No. Um,
Or how
well,
will
what
people learn more?
I know, I know. Well, one way I think that we could be better with it is so often if people are in a place of crisis and you go into a hospital and then you stay there for the amount of time a hospital can hold you and then you're released. And I have met people where it's when their loved ones are released and they're not getting follow like a really enough follow-up care is when something happens. So I think there's a need there. I do think we also need, like I said, more. I mean, I do see it in schools. There's a lot more focus on social emotional support. But it needs to start with parents too. So being able to encourage parents to start to really look through their things. And that's kind of what I've developed, is a way to guide people through some of their grief in order to start looking and become more aware of what those experiences are from their childhood in order to start that healing process.
Yes, and you have your podcast, which I saw the last one was about anger. Um,
Yeah.
I l I just I love that the title of a lot of these are just those, like, raw emotions. Tell me a little bit about your podcast and what you're diving into there.
Sure. So my podcast is Forward to Joy. And really, it's an opportunity for me to just share the tools and tips for ways that I've gotten through my grief, and also to give an opportunity for others to share their stories. And really, I just want to increase people's toolboxes and say, you don't have to wait for tragedy to get those coping skills. What can you do when you feel good? Which often when we feel good, we don't think we need them, but what can you put in place now when you feel good? So that when, not if, but when something happens, because life will happen, you at least have a baseline of some tools that can help you through it.
That's awesome. Is there anything else we have not mentioned that you would also like to make sure you share with everybody?
Definitely reach out at forwardtojoy.com. On there, there's a lot of resources. My book is on there. I think we've covered it all, and I'm just really grateful for this opportunity.
I am so glad to have you, and thank you for trusting me with your story. Thank you for coming on the show, and I know we have a lot more work to do in this space, and I am just so grateful, to know you, Alexandra, and to keep on going.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Krista.
All right. Thank you for joining us for this episode of She Diaries. We know these conversations can be incredibly heavy. If you're feeling overwhelmed or need support, please take a moment to care for yourself. In the show notes, you'll find links to mental health resources, crisis lines, and support groups. If you're in crisis or need immediate help, Call or text 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You are not alone. If today's story moved you, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode with someone who might need it. To stay connected, follow us on social media at Bright Sky House and subscribe to our e-newsletter at brightskyhouse.com. If you'd like to connect with a guest or share your own story for a future episode, send us a note at hello@brightskyhouse.com. Every story deserves to be heard. Thank you for helping bring this one to light. Until next time, I'm Krista Gregg, and this is She Diaries.